All right, let's talk about a fun project that I did this past week that I thought was kind of interesting because it is fairly unique in its idea. But for a while, I've gone back and I've come up with different solutions for retro systems when it comes to more current video out options, which usually comes down to some very complicated soldering running to a support board that then gives us a process signal for HDMI for current TVs. Well, this most recent project I did wasn't too bad, okay, when it comes to soldering. I'd say it's one of the easier jobs you can do, and it's unique in the sense that we take the original DS, we convert it over to USB-C for charging, as well as USB-C for video out, where you can take it and have it pop up here with minimal latency for streaming or recording, all from native hardware. And today I'm going to show you the process and how to do all of that. So guys, enjoy this video. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. We're going to start today with this video's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Ugreen. Organizing and charging your devices has never been easier with the Ugreen Nexode 65-watt 7-in-1 charging station and the Ugreen Nexode 140-watt charger. Delivering 65 watts of high-speed power with its GAN2 chip, the DigiNest Cube is able to fully charge a MacBook Air in less than 1.5 hours. With its broad compatibility, the charging station provides fast charging to just about any device such as phones, tablets, and laptops. You can also take advantage of 3 different AC outlets to connect home appliance. Now, if you're not looking for extra AC outlets, there's also the Nexode 140-watt charger that can deliver power through a single USB-C port using PD 3.1 to reach 140 watts and charge a MacBook Pro 16-inch from 0 to 56% in 30 minutes. The 2 USB-C and 1 USB-A ports support charging 2 laptops and a phone all at once and will intelligently adjust power outputs, protecting each device's battery. Also, by the way, this thing is tiny. It fits in the palm of my hand without sacrifices in power or quality. Ugreen has a bunch of Black Friday deals going on, letting you save up to 50% off, so check the link below in the description and take advantage of these discounts now. Thanks again to Ugreen for sponsoring today's video. So I found this kit on a site just called 3dscapture.com. Went for about $70 and it had everything I needed, mostly just a board and then the flex cable that solders to a bunch of points on the board. But the thing I like about this is there's no real complicated soldering in the sense that you have to run the ribbon cable up alongside of a chip with a bunch of legs. You got to solder it just right on all different fronts. This actually just kind of lines up with the board, and it's all sort of points and vias on top. You solder it, and that's kind of it. It really is pretty straightforward, but let's go through it here as I did record the process. Of course, you have to take the DS apart, which isn't bad. You do want to keep an eye on those tri-point screws on the back. They are known to strip, and because this plastic in particular is fairly brittle, the support posts underneath do have a tendency to break, which is really annoying. So keep that in mind more so when you're reassembling it so you don't torque the screws too much and shatter one of those legs off, because it's just annoying to deal with there. But once you get the backing off, you may have to deal with some like R and L, as they tend to also kind of pop off with it. But you then take a look at the board. There's a couple of screws here. We have 4 silver screws holding the board down. You would then unplug the cable at the top for the top screen. And then on the right side, you have 3 different ribbon cables, one being a larger one and then 2 smaller ones, these for things like the bottom screen, and then the antenna cable there, which then you can pull the entire board out. Now what you want to do is just clean off this side, since we're going to be doing all of our soldering here. So if there's any dust, just take some rubbing alcohol to it, maybe a paper towel, whatever, and just clean it up generally. You're going to see the ribbon cable, it does sit down and line up essentially one way, and that's what makes this so easy. We're not necessarily running it around to a single or multiple chips and just trying to get everything to line up perfectly. Just kind of setting this down and lining up one of the points, it all sort of locks into place. I still recommend just getting a good look, make sure you see silver points through all of those little circles. And what I would recommend doing is tacking it down on one side, double checking on the other, and just sort of going through with some flux, making sure everything sits down well. what I tend to do anyway, is do one cluster and then come in with something like a screwdriver or something, just kind of hold it down, not pressing down, sort of let the weight of the driver just kind of sit there, and then go around and tack it down further. You'll notice the ribbon cable kind of sinks down, gives you an opportunity to just kind of clean things up with some paste flux and make sure everything is attached well. So after I go through and make sure every one of these points is down solidly, I then have to take the ribbon cable and bend it over, which they do have a little spot here that's marked. You don't have to push hard to crease it, nothing like that. Just make sure it's in place, a little bit of pressure, and it's essentially going to reach down and touch 2 other points at the bottom. Same process here, just sort of hold it, tack one side, get the other side really, really well, and then come back to that first point. You do want to make sure that the cable is not going over either of those left face buttons. Just sort of make sure it's out of the way. Maybe use some Kapton tape or something just to help it out and hold it down, but otherwise that's it. Like, you're done with the main part of being able to not only pull video from this board, but also provide power, and that's something I like quite a bit with this modification. Now, this part was one that sort of annoyed me a bit because I didn't have my Dremel on hand, so I was kind of stuck doing a very ugly modification to the case. I basically just clipped the back off to make a window for the USB-C port. Essentially, what you want to do is go through and shave down, or in this case, I just clipped all these guiding pieces of plastic on the case. There is enough room next to where the stylus would sit in there for the stylus to still be there, while also having this USB-C port and that supporting board for USB and video out. It just, don't be like me here and maybe go in and shave it up really well with a Dremel, or technically you could file down that little square until it has the USB port sitting just right. If I could go back and do it again with the Dremel and not necessarily have the time constraints of, say, making this video, I would have done so and probably done a better job. But it's just the bottom casing. They're very easy to get. I'm sure I could go back and maybe replace this with one that I have a bit more time to file down and Dremel correctly. Anyway, with the bottom casing ready to go and then our board all soldered in with this ribbon cable, you set it back down. And when you do this, you want to make sure that all the ribbon cables are in place as the board is sitting in there, along with that antenna cable at the top. So there's that window at the bottom. Make sure the 2 smaller cables go through and are able to sit in to the locking mechanisms there, as well as that top cable over both. And then at the top left, you do have the top screen to plug in with that antenna cable, at which point we sit the main processing board down. And this is kind of dicey in the sense that you have to line it up correctly here, while also making sure that bottom plate would sit down right. So they basically say in the instructions to line it up with the card slot on the left side, while then having that, or the right side, while then having that bottom left corner line up with that metal shielding. It's one that you're going to want to experiment and make sure it fits just right before you peel the back tape off, because that is some strong tape and it'll grab on well and not want to move. So just make sure it's lined up as best as you can, and then sit the bottom casing on carefully. Don't force and push down on it, but I will say it fits pretty well. Like, it doesn't have that weird thing where there's like a board in there, it's bubbling maybe on one side, there's a lot of pressure on it. No, it closed up just fine. All the screws went back in, and if it wasn't for me and my clippers ripping it all off, it would probably look pretty stock. The website where you can order this board does have a program just called 3ds Capture, and it's a very basic program in its presentation and features, but it does what it's supposed to do. It captures footage well, and in fact, the latency on this is really, really good, to where I was just playing games directly off of my computer monitor, and the DS was essentially a controller, which worked really well for some games, especially Metroid Prime Hunters, because normally you'd have your hand sort of in the way, maybe while you're trying to look around using that bottom screen with the stylus. The fact that I could kind of look up at the screen and then just kind of move my hand around that way actually made it a much more enjoyable experience. And you can blow up the screen quite a bit. The game, because it is of course pulling directly from native hardware with the DS, can look pretty crunchy. Like, visuals or the video that first plays, you could tell it's a very low resolution image, but at the same time, it's probably some of the cleanest video I've seen in general while playing a DS game. At least from native hardware. I know you can emulate all this stuff, smooth it out, sure, but there's something about getting this footage natively from the hardware that is still pretty impressive with how clean it can look. Anyway, after that, I just started playing all kinds of different games on this to check it out, whether it's Mario Party. I had a Chrono Trigger thrown on there just for fun. Dragon Ball Z Attack or Dragon Ball Attack of the Saiyans. Really, really good game that I think is overlooked. And of course, you can play Game Boy Advance games on it, no problem. And this is probably the case where I would do the split and then just record the one of the screens, since it's just going to use one anyway. But here's Pokemon. I'm sure that's what most people want to play on this and this whole thing anyway. But looking back on this project, I think this is a pretty good one to take a shot at for a number of reasons. There is a 3DS capture board, and I've looked at it. I'm going to attempt it. It's very difficult. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. This lines up really, really well with the cable that they've provided. So there's not a lot of stuff you can mess up there. The DSs in general are not very expensive. They're pretty cheap, easy to find, and there's quite a bit of room really to work with inside of the casing. And you're not necessarily running extra wires all over the place. The soldering is pretty straightforward, where you're mostly just pulling solder in any of these different through holes, so it's all kind of stenciled and lined up for you. And on top of all of that, it adds functionality to a system that a lot of people have just kind of moved on from. Like, you would just get a DS Lite if you're going to get one of these DS systems, but if you want to maybe capture native footage from a DS, as in using the actual hardware, or maybe you want to stream, or who knows, maybe you like the idea of playing the DS off of your computer monitor, yeah, I think this would be a lot of fun to have as just a project, even to get into maybe modifying a system that would involve soldering as part of the process. But a lot of fun. I think it's worth checking out. Let me know what you guys think about this down below. I know, again, you can emulate a lot of these different games, but part of it is just the process, the satisfaction of completing something like this, and yeah, having the ability to see some of these DS games from native hardware in a whole new light. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.